So where the weather is the most fluid and consistent, California, places in the Southwest, certainly I would imagine would be so much better and more tolerable for people that have migraines without those big temperature and weather profile changes.
Welcome to Migraine Again, helping you eat, breathe, survive, thrive, and engage better despite migraine. If you or someone you know struggles with migraine often, join us for today's insightful conversation. Now here's your host, founder and managing editor of migraineagain.com and co-host of the Migraine World Summit, Paula Dumas.
Do you ever sense weather changes in your bones? Or think of yourself as a human barometer? There's no doubt that changes in the weather can dramatically affect our health. For some people, fierce thunderstorms and hot, humid days can often signal the dreaded onset of another raging migraine attack or sinus headache. Barometric pressure outside might feel like it's increasing the pressure inside your head. And if you're sensitive to weather changes, you might even be able to predict a local storm before today's guest. She's a top meteorologist with some fascinating insights about the relationship between weather and our health. And we'll be back to meet her right after this.
Support for Migraine Again and today's podcast is brought to you by SpeakYourMigraine.com. Developed by Amgen and Novartis, SpeakYourMigraine.com gives people with migraine a voice, combining facts and shared experiences to break stigmas and paint a clearer picture of migraine. You're listening to Migraine Again. For show notes and resources from this episode, check out our program page on migraineagain.com. And now, once again, here's your host, Paula Dumas.
You may know expert meteorologist Alexandra Steele from her roles on camera, forecasting the weather for the Weather Channel, CNN, and now CBS 46. She observes, reports, and forecasts the weather that has such a profound, repetitive, and uncontrollable effect on our health. She's with us today to help us understand how and why weather can affect chronic conditions like migraine, sinusitis, and more. Alexandra, welcome to Migraine Again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're so glad you're here.
Yes, well, weather everywhere, right? It not only affects everything and everyone constantly, and in more ways each and every day, it seems like, right?
That is true. That is true. And I hope that today in our chat with you, we're going to learn more about the science behind it, because really once we understand that, that gives us a lot more control.
Mm-hmm. You know, one interesting thing, you talk about control and how weather impacts our health in so many factors. In terms of the weather and the meteorology of weather, it has gotten so much better. Even 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, computer models that we use, and there are about 4 or 5 of them, and when you put them into motion, and literally 3 weeks ago, we knew the country next week that the weather was going to get colder. The jet stream was going to drop. The temperatures that have been so warm in the southeast, Atlanta and Birmingham and Nashville, all the way to New York and Boston, they were going to cool down because of the movement of this jet stream literally weeks ago. So knowing that far in advance, too, when the weather will change, will it warm up, will it cool down, when severe weather will strike, really helps in terms of your health, I'd imagine, and kind of knowing the changes, and with the forecasting being so good, so well ahead of time, that must be helpful in the long run.
Oh, it is. So in your experience, weather forecasting has gotten better over the past couple of decades?
Oh, 100% better. I mean, I also work at CBS in Atlanta doing the local morning show, Saturday and Sunday mornings. And so last Saturday, we were talking about what was going to happen this week. And I mean, literally a 48-hour forecast is 95, 98% accurate. It's that good. And even when you go out 4 and 5 and 6 days, so looking at the weekend, on the weekend, talking about this cold air coming, I mean, it literally comes, and a front will pass, and showers and thunderstorms are expected to come next Wednesday or Thursday. Now, the timing and the hours when the rain may come, even looking out 5, 7 days, maybe a few hours either way, 12 hours, 8 hours, a little bit earlier, a little bit later. But we know that front will come. That rain will come. So as you get closer and the models get more accurate and each model kind of comes into agreement on the timing, it certainly has been incredibly increased in accuracy within the last 5 years, 10 years, 3 years even.
That's encouraging to know. And now we have it in the palm of our hand, which is even more powerful.
Right.
So many people in pain probably consult the weather forecast even more than their doctor. And so it's important to anticipate how we're going to feel on any given day. How did you decide to study the science of meteorology?
I went to Brown undergrad, and then I went to graduate school at Northwestern and got a master's in journalism. Mm-hmm. And after, I became a reporter. And my first job was in Kingston, New York, and I was a reporter going out in the field for a year or so. And they had a weathercaster at the time, not a meteorologist, doing the weather. And they said, Alexandra, would you try weather? And I'm like, weather? I don't know. Sure, I'll try anything. So I just tried it. And I loved it. I just found it so fascinating. And literally, that was 21 years ago. And so then I went back and got my meteorology degree concurrent to working in television in New Haven, Connecticut at ABC. So I went a circuitous route to get to meteorology. But, I absolutely love it. It's fascinating. 20 years ago it was fascinating. But even now, more so, with the weather not only on the minds of those with health concerns or just your day-to-day activities. If you're playing tennis, if you're playing golf, your kid's got a game, the changing weather, global warming. There's so many aspects to it. People care about weather more so today than they ever did on every myriad topic possible. So the changing, the forecasting, the improving of computer models in the future, it's just an incredible science. And it's so fascinating to kind of be a part of it as it evolves.
It is. Well, we're glad you chose to focus on this area in your journalism career. Weather's got a distinct effect on our health. Mm-hmm. Which conditions do you find are most affected by these changing weather patterns?
Well, it's some of the health conditions most affected by changing weather. Spring pollen, of course, right? Allergies, whether you have pollen allergies to grass, trees, ragweed. But weather changes also in temperature and humidity produce similar symptoms for those. So I think people have to distinguish the sneezing, the congestion, nasal passage swelling. Is that pollen allergies or is that changes in temperature and changes in humidity that are creating those symptoms? So they're very similar, I think, but I guess one has to know what they have. But spring pollen and allergies also. One interesting thing is it seems cold weather and thunderstorms trigger asthma attacks, which I found fascinating. For people with asthma, they exercise a lot, they run outside when it's cold, and breathing in that cold air seems to have an effect. So that cold air increases the cooling off of your airways and causes those airways to swell. So that's one aspect. Also, in addition to cold weather, thunderstorms seem to produce asthma attacks. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. The wind, they think, with thunderstorms, carrying pollen grains at ground level, then the pollen gets into your airwaves, wherever you may be, and possibly can cause an asthma attack. So cold weather, thunderstorms triggering asthma attacks, spring pollen, allergies, temperatures, humidity causing symptoms like allergies. Also, it seems joint pain, that sudden changes in the barometric pressure, such as the switch maybe before a storm or after a storm, can trigger that. Mm-hmm. So the cold weather causing these changes, these painful changes in the joint fluid thickness. Some researchers have found that the barometric pain changes cause joint pain. Mm-hmm.
I believe it. There are a couple of interesting studies on migraine in particular. One was done by the University of Cincinnati, and they found that people had an increased risk of migraine on days when lightning struck within 25 miles of somebody's home. And then a Japanese university found that about 3/4 of people that they tracked through a year had more migraines when the barometric pressure dropped.
Yeah, it really seems like barometric pressure. And, what's interesting is about barometric pressure. Well, here's what it is. Barometric pressure, it's referring to the pressure in the air or the amount of force that is being applied to your body from the air. And so whenever on the weather we talk about a rising barometer, I always teach kids thumbs up, rising barometer, good weather coming. Thumbs down, falling barometer, a bad weather coming. So it's more, it seems, with migraines that it's not so much the pressure, but it's the changing pressure, being it changing up or going down. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when you're on a plane, as the air pressure changes with the plane's altitude, you experience that ear popping. The higher the altitude, the lower the air pressure, and your ears react. So it seems that barometric pressure and the changing, so it's putting that force on your body. Our sinuses are filled with air. So any changes in the air pressure affect those, and thus those creates those painful headaches.
That is fascinating, and I appreciate the thumbs up and thumbs down for those of us who are not scientists.
Simple's the best.
It definitely is.
Mm-hmm.
So people with migraine report that these changes in barometric pressure can trigger an attack, and you say it could be the increase or decrease in pressure, right?
Yep.
Do you know anything about lightning strikes and the affiliation with that and migraine?
Well, I think lightning strikes are associated with thunderstorms.
Okay.
And when a thunderstorm comes in, that's falling pressure. So it's really all related. It's all the kind of the fluidity in the atmosphere. And with the rising barometer, improving weather, falling barometer, thus thunderstorms, severe weather, the front passes, the barometric pressure lowers. So it's all similar. Those are perhaps just aspects within a front that passes, thus changing the barometric pressure, lowering it, and then you're feeling it.
Mm-hmm. So the IHS, International Headache Society, identifies 7 triggers for weather-related migraines. Temperature changes, high humidity, high winds, stormy weather, extremely dry conditions, bright lights and sun glare, and barometric pressure changes. Easy for you to say, tough for me to say.
It's not even easy for me on the air, I'll tell you that much, and you're live all the time.
That's right.
You know, one aspect is seasonal migraines. So light and sleep habits, right, influence migraines. But these are also changes with the seasons, and they may alter the mechanisms in your brains responsible for migraines. Bright light may trigger those migraines. Now, researchers I read speculate that the amount of sunlight might impact how well a person sleeps or the lack of sleep, and then thus that could trigger a migraine. So I think A leads to B, which leads to C, and it all gets to the same C. You know, whether it's the light, i.e. you're not sleeping, whether, you know, with the change when we turn our clocks back or turn our clocks forward, and that impacts your daily life, and the time change, and thus the light change, and then thus the sleep change, and then thus the triggering of the headache. I mean, it's, you know, so you kind of all leads to the same outcome, and in reality, it's all kind of under the same puzzle, so to speak.
Right, and what you say is that A leads to B leads to C, so let's just take a couple of these. Sun glare leads to light sensitivity, which is a migraine trigger. Right?
Right.
The barometric pressure changes could change the pressure inside your head, and the lightning strikes, which are associated with the barometric pressure changes, could affect that internal pressure and cause pain. The high-low humidity is an interesting one, and it might be associated with winds at the same time because that affects your hydration level, which is also a trigger.
Well, so high humidity, a rising barometric pressure signals better weather, right, or that thumbs up. But it also signals warmer weather. So high humidity, rising barometer equating to warmer weather. Rising temperatures lead to an increase in humidity levels, and then that high humidity is a common migraine trigger. So again, it's that A to B to C. So, you know, it's interesting, related.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Seasonal weather changes also affect people with migraine. In fact, we get a lot of complaints when spring and fall come in particular. Do we have any idea what's happening in the atmosphere that brings on those seasons? And I realize it varies a lot by geography, but generally speaking, the seasonal changes, what might trigger more attacks?
Well, absolutely. I mean, well, seasonal, think spring, think southeast or wherever you may live that has a really exacerbated pollen level. Spring pollen, of course, with the change of seasons, leading to allergies or migraines or those changes. Also, with the seasonal change, there's changes in temperatures and changes in humidity, which sometimes obviously produce those symptoms of a migraine and then to trigger that, right?
Yeah, well, one doctor explained it, and he said, you know, the migraine brain is much more sensitive to all kinds of changes in the environment than traditional brains are from a neurological standpoint. And so when there are subtle changes in the weather or dramatic changes in the weather, there can be a response. And the response can be an attack. If all things are adding up and you've got not just a weather change, but also, a hormonal change going on inside your body, a high exposure to irritating light, those three things added together could bring on a migraine attack. So that was the way he explained it to us.
Yeah, you know, that makes sense. I mean, everyone is different, right? And some people are sensitive, i.e. some people have allergies and some people don't. And so for some people, weather changes may cause an imbalance in brain chemicals, for others that they wouldn't, including maybe serotonin, which can prompt a migraine. Right. And then exposure to these triggers for weather-related migraines may worsen a headache initially caused by other triggers, or may get exacerbated for one person and the other person doesn't feel it because of their own brain chemistry.
That's right. Well, you're listening to Migraine Again, and our guest is expert meteorologist Alexandra Steele. We'll have more tips on preventing a storm inside your head when it storms outside right after this.
Just a quick thanks to Amgen and Novartis, the makers of SpeakYourMigraine.com. Go to SpeakYourMigraine.com on your computer, tablet, or smartphone to take the Migraine Impact Assessment Test so you can understand how much of an impact migraine has on your life. This is Migraine Again, encouraging and empowering you in your battle against migraine because you deserve to feel better. You can hear this conversation again or share it with someone who might like to hear it by going to migraineagain.com. Now, once again, here's Paula.
And we're here with Alexandra Steele, expert meteorologist, talking about weather and migraine. And during the Migraine World Summit 2017, we had an interesting chat with Bert Sperling, who heads up the bestplaces.net organization and does research on geography and how it affects the best places to live. One of the studies he did was on the best places to live with migraine. Mm-hmm. And he has identified the best and worst migraine cities in the U.S. So among the worst cities, Cincinnati, Madison, Wisconsin, Little Rock, Arkansas, Knoxville, Tennessee, St. Louis, Nashville, Johnson City, Tennessee, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Greenville, South Carolina, and Canton, Ohio. There's a lot of Tennessee going on there.
A lot of Tennessee.
I feel bad for the people in Tennessee.
Yeah.
But tell me, weather is one of the factors in there. As a meteorologist, what weather do you see happening in those locations that might be triggering this?
Well, places I would throw Duluth in there, Juneau, Alaska, Butte, Montana. What do they all have in common? I don't see a Los Angeles. I don't see a Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. What they all have in common are places where storms pass, big weather changes. When you look on our weather maps and you see a big blue H or a big red L, mm-hmm. high pressure, low pressure, fronts passing, that's really in areas of the country that have a lot of storminess, that have a lot of changeable weather. So the best U.S. cities to live, if you have migraines, would be where it's stable and very consistent weather, i.e. not these huge passages of storms and fronts and severe thunderstorms and huge snowstorms and huge rainstorms. So I would throw in, for the best places, the California coast. Mm-hmm. Are you living in L.A.? You're all, yes, San Diego, Long Beach. Places in California where the weather is so stable, it has a lot to do with the average daily high temperatures in some of those places are in the mid-60s most times of the year. They don't get too hot, so we're not seeing a big fluctuation in humidity or dew points. Also in the temperatures in the summer, stay below 85 degrees. Also little rain. Some of these places in California have less than 20 inches of rain in a year. Skies are mostly clear. It's sunny 70% of the time. Mm-hmm. That's where the weather is most stable, and there aren't these big synoptic weather changes, i.e. those fronts passing, high pressure, low pressure, big jet stream drops. Much more consistent. Arizona, too. Little rain, lots of sun, and places that don't have these huge temperature profile changes because of fronts or a jet stream. We're going to see a jet stream drop in the eastern half of the country. With that, temperatures are dramatically going to drop. Where they were 72 days ago, we're going to have temperatures for low temperatures this coming weekend in the 20s. So 50, 40, 30-degree temperature drops really impact. We talk about a drop in barometric pressure or changes in humidity levels or the dehydration aspect because of the dryness and the changes in that. Mm-hmm. So where the weather is the most fluid and consistent, California, places in the Southwest, certainly I would imagine would be so much better and more tolerable for people that have migraines without those big temperature and weather profile changes.
That seems to be true. And there are, of course, more than one factor that he considers in his algorithm for which are the best cities. But there are a lot of California cities that perform very well in his index. I see some in Texas, which is curious to me because when I moved from California to Texas, I grew up in California, and I moved from California to Texas was when my migraine attacks became much more prevalent. I think there were a lot of other factors going on, but it was one of many factors. So, and Texas does get some crazy storms, that's for sure.
And it's such a massive state, and Southeast Texas the weather is so much different from the Northwest or the Panhandle, where it can be stormy and tornadic and everything else. So where were you in Texas when the onset of this impacted you?
Dallas. Yeah, I think it could have been my massive concussion. Maybe it had a little something to do with it. Instead, we can't blame the weather for everything, right?
Oh, thank you so much. That's just the nicest thing anyone said to me all day.
Yeah. So heat and humidity, we talked a little bit about that, can be especially difficult for people with migraine due to the dehydration risk. I think we don't pay as much attention to our net hydration levels. Any tips for managing those dog days of summer?
Right. I mean, high humidity and then extremely dry conditions seem to exacerbate dehydration, which is one of the common migraine triggers. And what seems clear weather-wise, cloudy, rainy days with lower barometric pressure produce more migraines. So, I mean, if you're out there and it's so incredibly, you are dehydrated, obviously drink water. They say, 8 to 10, 8-ounce glasses a day. But in addition to drinking water, there's foods that are really hydrating, like coconut water. A lot of these things that are very au courant now, very current. Coconut water, watermelon, cucumber, kiwi, bell peppers also are very hydrating. And also healthy alternatives to water if you're sick of water. You can make homemade smoothies or those frozen fruit pops, if you're in a hot environment and it's so warm and humid and you get so dehydrated. Teas. Also, and of course, hydrate before and after you exercise. Everyone knows that, but it's really hard to drink the amount of water that is recommended. That's like you need a big water bottle at your desk and, drinking it 24/7.
You're right. I actually began measuring it. I thought I drank enough water. I thought I especially when I would be playing tennis outdoors in summertime and, bright light and lots of heat and humidity to manage. I thought I was doing okay. But then I began tracking it to make sure that I got half of my net weight in ounces, I believe is the equation. And I found that I wasn't. And I filled up 2 large pitchers of water and then I set an alarm on my phone because I thought if I want to create a new habit, I've got to be scientific about this because I know what will happen. I'll slack off and it won't happen. So, and it took me about a month of doing that to actually change the way I hydrated.
Yeah, and it's a lot. I mean, to set timers, and you thought you were drinking a ton, 2 huge pitchers.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny because with kids these days, like my daughter takes a water bottle to school. Kids have water constantly. Like they're taking water breaks every 20 seconds,
They do, yeah.
So water is such a big aspect to children now, so maybe they won't have to, like we, set timers because there's so much more, like, fluid, no pun intended, with the drinking of the water day in and day out. I mean, my kid doesn't go anywhere without a water bottle, and she's refilling it 18 times a day.
So if you're a person who is, if you don't have a teacher in the classroom to tell you, drink water, right? Right. And you're simply trying to stay on top of the weather so that you can manage your health. You've given us lots of hope saying, hey, the weather models are going to be incredible 48 hours out with a high level of accuracy. What's the most effective way for us to track the weather on a daily basis, to know what's coming so we can plan?
I mean, it's funny, as a television meteorologist on the air, I want everyone to watch television 24/7. But, that's really not what's happening in this day and age. This is a whole different subject, but the world of TV viewing is so different than it was 2, 3, 5 years ago. People have their phones. That's no one moves anywhere without their phone in their pocket. And so on your phone, there's so many tools through weather.com or CBS 46, whatever you want, or wherever you are in the country. Your local forecast and looking at it farther out. And there's even interesting tools that I use all the time. You can go on the computer and look at computer models and track them and look at yourself for the 7 days out, 14 days out, just to maybe put your mind at bay And you really can know the weather. I mean, as you said, the forecasting has gotten so accurate, not only in the 24, 48 hour, but even looking out. In the old days, 7, 8, 10-day forecasts that we do on TV really became climatologically appropriate, so you kind of erred toward where things should be, wherever you are in this country, Los Angeles or Dallas or Atlanta or Nashville, Tennessee. So it became more climatologically on mark. But now those 7 and 10-day forecasts looking out are really so apt and so on point. Whether rain's coming in front passages, those are a big aspect to where and how you feel. And knowing the front will pass and knowing it's 7 days out in whatever time frame you're in, and then the rain comes, the pressure changes, the humidity drops or it lowers, that's a big factor. So on your phone, you can really track the weather so far out to such an accurate degree to kind of maybe just give your own self a heads up and prepare, maybe do what you need to do wherever you may live to be prepared for the changing conditions in the future.
Right. So it's really about using those tools and syncing it up with your personal calendar and looking for the next week out, probably plan a week at a time. You understand the weather and the place that you're going to be. Because I used to travel a lot, even more so than I do today with my work. Mm-hmm. And like last month, I had to go to Scottsdale for a conference, for a headache conference. Big national headache conference that happens there. And the weather is a lot drier in Scottsdale. And I'll tell you, I got off the plane and I felt it immediately.
Absolutely. With feeling maybe a little wheezy and dry. And even when you're showering, the water is so different in different cities and your skin is drier. 100%. So kind of tracking, I mean, that's a job in itself if you travel a lot, kind of tracking the weather and how it will impact your migraines and your headaches and your issues that you have health-wise. You know, it's quite a science to do, but it certainly would be so worth it just to be prepared and kind of know what's in store as you move around the country because it feels so differently. One day, as you maybe it'd be fun little interesting kind of thing to do, travel around the country in a different day and see how different you feel and how dramatically the weather impacts it, just kind of stepping out of the plane and allowing yourself a few hours in a different environment.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, they're not really tuned into whether the weather affects their migraine. I think it probably took me a good 15 or 20 years before I even understood that this was a factor in how I felt. So if you are out there and you don't know about this, just begin to track the weather and use one of the great digital apps and plot out your own case and just try to see if, in fact, the weather is a factor. It's not a trigger for everybody, but for many people, they discover that it is. And then it can be liberating once you are able to read the forecast, apply it, and plan. Because the frustrating thing about migraine are the unanticipated attacks that just derail your day and derail your week. And if you can get ahead of that, you can plan for it. And that's the beauty of forecasting, right?
Well, another thing, as you plan your day and understand how your own body reacts to the health, it's a good thing that the weather, in tandem with you charting your own course, the weather also and the computer models have gotten so much more accurate that you can work in tandem and put those two together. So as you travel, go about your day around your own city or changing cities, you kind of create your own chart so you can chart your own health and how you feel and improve that and do what you need to do to make yourself and your health really feel much better.
Yep, definitely. Some people go as far as, in addition to tracking it online, they'll invest in a barometer and they'll have their own barometer at home.
Not just a barometer, but even a small weather home setup has humidity levels inside the house, outside the house, has sun, how much sun, temperature, barometric pressure, everything that's really, as you've been saying, is so related to health and wellness. So being able to see that and maybe putting it as an alarm clock as well, maybe beside your bed, and that will give you a kind of a morning reminder as to how the weather will impact your health. And those are all the specifications as to how, and then tracking them, putting it by your bedside really would be a great reminder morning, noon, and night.
Good deal. Well, that's a great tip. Thank you so much for that. And, daily weather forecasts are definitely a handy tool for people whose health is affected by these atmospheric changes. And prediction, I think, is the first step toward preventing your next brainstorm. So, Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us today. Nasty weather doesn't have to mean a nasty migraine.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. So watching the weather, whether you're watching on your local station or nationally on the Weather Channel or going to apps online, because knowing the weather really to predict the future of your own health is going to be the best thing for you. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. And when we come back, the listener question of the day.
A quick thanks to our advertisers, Amgen and Novartis, who have developed the SpeakYourMigraine.com website, where you can read stories, gather tools, and resources to help change the migraine conversation. It's time to turn private pain into collective change at SpeakYourMigraine.com. Hey, we'd like to hear about your life with migraine and offer some help and encouragement if we can. If you've got a question about migraine, we'll do our best to answer it and might even include it on one of our upcoming podcasts. If you'd like to submit a question, just go to our website, migraineagain.com/question. And Paula, today's listener question comes from Pam, who writes, "Every time I plan a trip, I have a migraine attack. Why does that happen, and what can I do to prevent it?"
Good question, Pam. That had happened to me so many times that I had to investigate it a little bit more and find out why. And I learned about this thing called the letdown effect. When you amp up for any big event, and then the first day after that, you will get an attack. So the adrenaline basically carries you through the event, like running to the airport and planning for the trip and everything, trying to finish up your work or your responsibilities and get everybody out the door. And then when you finally relax, you have this letdown migraine that attacks you on the first day. Very common pattern. It actually is called the Saturday syndrome because it also occurs just on weekends for some people. But let's just take the acute. You're going on a big trip with the family or with some friends, and the first day of vacation, you wind up getting a massive migraine attack. So what can you do about that? Well, first of all, you have to accept that migraine is coming with you in your carry-on luggage. Didn't buy a ticket, but it's in your biology. Therefore, it's not staying at home, which means that you have to prepare, like you always do, with your travel kit of whatever you use to try to manage your symptoms while you're away or at home. You want to take that with you in your carry-on luggage, not just in your regular luggage, but in your carry-on luggage, because you could start to have an attack while you're on the train, plane, or automobile, that you're going to want to have access to those tools if it's ice or whatever it might be. And then take things to manage the environment that you're going to be in. So I fly a lot. I'm a 1,000,000-miler plus, and I always carry these big Bose headphones. No endorsement, but put them over my ears, and it helps manage the intense sound. I bring an empty water bottle and continually refill it and hydrate. I pass on any cocktails, as if that tempted you, and peanuts in flight, because that's not good. And then once I get there, try to keep things as consistent as possible. That's especially tricky when you're changing time zones. But you want to keep your sleep as consistent as possible and your food as consistent as possible, because that will not disrupt your system. And then if you think that you're going to need any urgent care while you're away from home, make sure that you check that out beforehand. Call your insurance company so that they know that you're going to be out of town. That may help you to get coverage for that while you're there. You're just protecting yourself. And then bring your hat, your sunglasses, your eye mask, a window cover to block the light, anything that you may need to manage the new environment that you're going to be in. And then finally, don't pretend to be okay if you're not okay, because the people that you're traveling with, family or friends, they know you and they want you to have a good time, or as good a time as you can have. And so if you're having a rough day, don't fake it. And don't say, sure, I can go climb that mountain with you, when you really need to be at home practicing good self-care and just taking the morning off and then catch up with them in the afternoon. That would be in the best interest of everyone and allow you to enjoy your trip as much as possible.
Well, Paula, given that this letdown migraine attack that we're talking about is caused seemingly by the stress leading up to and perhaps going through this big event, Is there a way to manage that stress on the front end so that you might avoid this particular type of migraine attack altogether?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great point. You can back up from the day of your departure and say, what do I need to get done and who do I need to do it? And the answer is it doesn't have to be all you. Lists work wonders. I have this little list that I use as a crutch, which is, pack this. And so I have a check mark. I'm not worried about leaving anything behind because I've planned it out. Usually my bags are half packed, but that's just me. You follow your own habit. But try not to lose too much sleep before you depart. Try not to overwork yourself in anticipation of being gone. Distribute the responsibility for getting ready for the trip to everybody who's going on the trip and don't take it all on yourself. And then just rest up in anticipation of the trip because you're not in control of when the flights depart, when the trains leave. Those things are out of your control. And get there early. Running is not going to help you. So anything you can do to take the stress out of leading up to the trip will help reduce the chances that you'll have an attack on the first day of the trip.
This is great advice for the entire family, whether they have migraine or not, because how many of us have said after a vacation, I need a vacation to get over the vacation.
Yeah.
So managing all this ahead of time is great for any of us just trying to avoid that stress. Thanks, Paula. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I hope that helps anyone out there who's listening and planning a trip in the near future. I'm Paula Dumas, and just a quick reminder before we go today, could you please take a minute and leave us a review wherever you listen to our program? If it's iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play, any of those platforms, just leave us a review. It helps other people discover us as well, and we would really appreciate it. That's it for now. Thanks for spending time with us on Migraine Again. I'm Paula Dumas, wishing you a pain-free day.
Thanks for spending part of your day with us. We hope that you feel encouraged and empowered in your battle against migraine because you deserve better. If you want to suffer less and live more despite migraine, be sure to check out all the great resources on migraineagain.com. Follow us on your favorite social network and subscribe to our free newsletter and this program. If you enjoyed today's episode, tell a friend about it and be sure and join us again next time on Migraine Again. You'll be glad you did.